Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Liaqat Zaman, and this is a series, hopefully, to give you a better understanding of what fiqh is about. It's called the Tafaqquh series, and the word Tafaqquh, it means to really exert yourself in trying to understand something, right? So it's not going to be just sitting back on your sofa and understanding things just like that. You actually have to think about these things, right? So the past 5 lessons, I hope you guys have watched them and benefit from them. And if there's any feedback you can give, please give feedback so then I can use that in future videos as well. So today's lesson is going to be about the idea of the Sunnah. So when we talk about the Sunnah, we have to understand Sunnah is related to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Deen has come to us through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This amazing individual sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was the one who received revelation from Allah, and then he not only conveyed that revelation, but he also explained the revelation as well. This explanation of the revelation is what we call the Sunnah. All right, so the Sunnah is basically the Deen, if you think about it, because everything has come from the Prophet ﷺ. But we take this understanding of the Sunnah, and then what we do is we categorize it. So we'll say those things that have reached us at the highest level, we call that fard, that you have to do. And then those matters that have reached us at a slightly lower level, where there is some speculation, probabilistic, that we say this is wajib. Now, then you have this term, which is the Sunnah Mu'akkada, if you've heard. It's basically where the Prophet ﷺ, he emphasized something, but he didn't make it necessary on people. So this is like the emphatic Sunnah. This is the thing which we want to talk about today, actually. So we don't want to discuss that Sunnah which has resulted in something becoming fard or wajib. We want to discuss that Sunnah which is extra, beyond the fard and wajib. Right, so this is what we call the Sunnah. So we have this idea that the Prophet ﷺ, he would walk on the street. The Prophet ﷺ, he would eat food, sometimes alone, sometimes with the companions. The Prophet ﷺ, he would talk to people. He would wear clothing. He would wear a turban on his head sometimes. He would use a twig to clean his teeth. He would shake people's hands with his right hand. He would go to the toilet, far away from people in privacy. So he would do all of these daily things that we would normally assume that person would do. All of these actions themselves, do they actually come under the Sunnah, which we consider to be rewarding in and of themselves? So the Hanafis argue that if these have not been emphasized by the Prophet ﷺ, if some reward has not been mentioned about them, like sometimes the Prophet ﷺ might say something and then he might say, whoever does this gets this reward, or this is something that you should do. So that kind of like elevates that practice. Now that practice is elevated, and we call this elevated practice a mustahab act. It's got some reward attached to it, right? But if it's not elevated, it stays as a normal practice then. So it's permissible for us to do that. Like, for example, nowhere did the Prophet ﷺ tell the companions that they should wear hand-stitched clothes. In them days, clothes were made by hand, right? The cloth was made by hand. So nowhere do we find, so therefore wearing hand-stitched clothes, we don't find anywhere that there's any special reward attached to it. So we would call that permissible. Some people might have a term for it, which they call the extra sunnah, the sunnah za'idah. Right? So they say غير تعبدي sunnah, sunnah that we're not considered to or necessary to follow, basically. If you want to do it, it's fine. If you don't want to do it, there's no sin upon you. There's no blame upon you. Not a bad person at all. If you don't want to live in a house that has no central heating, that has no glass windows, that has no insulation, right? Made of basically a mud hut made from bricks and rocks, then you are not considered to be sinful, right? Even though many of the companions lived like that. So this is something permissible. So then now, if there is a bit of emphasis on there, like some emphasis, some reward attached to it, we would say, okay, it rises now, it becomes mustahab. Mustahab means something which the Sharia likes us to do. But now if it's something which the Prophet ﷺ did time again and again and again, and he rarely left it, maybe a few times he left it, this would now become like in between mustahab and in between wajib now. It's like, it's really important for Muslims to try and do this as best as they can. And if someone leaves it for no reason, time and time again, this person should be told off, like blameworthy. People should point at them and say, why are you not doing this for? But it won't necessarily be sinful. So this is what we call sunnah mu'akkada, emphatic sunnah. And there's degrees of this as well, you can say. There's another term that's used for this is what we call sunnatul huda, guided sunnah. Right? So if you do these regularly, like if you pray your 2 rakats after Maghrib, and if you pray your 4 rakats before your Dhuhr, and 2 rakats after Dhuhr, and 2 rakats before the fard of Fajr, if you do all of these, you get, not only do you get reward for it, because you're doing something which is extra than fard and wajib, but because the Prophet ﷺ did this a lot, you're more closer to being guided in the right path, on the right lane. So this is what we call sunnatul huda. And there's many examples of this, like for example, having an azan, for example, you have an azan and the iqama when you have jama'ah, or for example, like when you're doing the wudu, you have, you wash your hands, right? You wash your hands before you start, you wash all limbs 3 times each, and so forth. So all of these things that you find in the Quran or in the hadith emphasize that he did it frequently. This is something that we should do. Now the scholars, they have a term. How do you sort of decide what is sunnah? Because the Prophet ﷺ day in, day out walked. The Prophet ﷺ day in, day out prayed in Masjid Nabawi. The Prophet ﷺ day in, day out wore clothes. So how do we say, okay, well, he did that a lot, but then the 2 rakats after Maghrib, he did that a lot. So now why don't you say these are also sunnah mu'akkada? Well, there's a definition that we have to come out with now. That definition is this. الطريقة المسلوكة في الدين من غير لزوم. The adopted path by the early generation. So that thing that you go back in time and have a look, what practice are the early generation doing, which is widespread, right? So it's tariqah, it's a method, or masluka, it's been adopted by the early generation, and they believe it to be part of the religion. So that's the third part. And without it being necessary. That's the key. The last 2 points are very important. So there were lots of things that the early generation did. For example, like they walked to the mosque maybe, they wore clothing, a certain type, they ate food sitting down on the floor, they ate mostly food that was very simple, dates, water, etc. But they didn't do that because it was part of the religion. They did that because it was part and parcel of the culture and society at that time. So that is not sunnah mu'akkada. Right? That is not something, unless there is a particular hadith about it that we should follow that. There's no specific reward in doing any of that. So sitting on the floor, there would be no reward in sitting on the floor. There'd be no reward in wearing that type of clothing that they wore. Unless a person does it, the scholars say, with this love for the Prophet ﷺ, in fact, so overwhelmed with the love that they just want to just copy the Prophet ﷺ in as much as they can, then that's a very good thing. But not because of the act, but because of the love that they have. All right. And if another person doesn't do it, doesn't mean that they don't love the Prophet ﷺ. Just means that some people have different varying sort of like aspects of how that manifests, that love manifests. So going back to this then. So tariqah al-masluka fi din, it has to be something in the religion. Makes sense? The Prophet ﷺ would fast regularly on Mondays and Thursdays. But was it tariqah masluka fi? Do we find the Sahaba doing this? No, you probably won't even find hardly, but a handful of Sahaba may be doing this. So it's part of the deen, but it wasn't something that was done as being necessary. So that's why we would say that this is considered to be a good thing to do, because the Prophet ﷺ did it, and there's some virtue attached to it. It's nice to do, but it wouldn't be considered to be necessary. The similar idea would go for using the miswak stick. The miswak stick, although the Prophet ﷺ would use the miswak stick, because remember, miswak stick is basically a twig of a tree. That's all it is. It's a tree, any type of tree in them days. There were some trees that they preferred, that they would use. But it was not done tariqah masluka fi din, that this stick has to be used, otherwise you won't get reward for it. And so this is not considered necessary. It's a good thing to use a stick to clean your teeth, but if you were to use another tool to clean your teeth, then the cleaning of the teeth has been achieved. Now I know this video has gone very long, but I just want to shorten down because I know some of you guys enjoy these kind of discussions over here. So now brings me to the last point now, which is Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. He says basically, in order for something to be counted as a sunnah, it has to be within the realm of the fard. So he then further specifies it. So it has to be something in the realm of the fard, right? So in the wudu, I'll give you an example. So for example, let's say you see my face. So see all this hairline I have to wash all of this, all of this, yeah? And I wash all of this, and obviously my face is washed. But what about the beard, my beard that goes beyond? So this is my chin over here. So as you can see, my chin, if I put my fist over here, you can see this there, and the beard goes long. So that's the line of my face, the jawline. So here we have this extra bit. So washing this, or would this actually be counted as being sunnah? He says, no, it's not. It's permissible, but because it's beyond the limits of the face, it does not complement the fard itself, because the fard's limit is all the way up to the jaws and the chin. This goes beyond. So the sunnah cannot be something which goes beyond the realm of the fard, as opposed to, interlacing your fingers between your fingers, right? So he says that is sunnah because it's still within the realm of the fard. So this is the fard, the hands of the fard. So therefore, whatever's within them, that would be considered to be the sunnah itself, right? And like this, you can understand, like in salat, anything that is going to complement a fard act in salat, like standing is a fard act, qira'ah is a fard act, ruku is a fard act, sujood is a fard act, and tashahud is a fard act. So anything that complements these would be counted as being a sunnah mu'akkada, and anything not would be counted as something less than that, a mustahab or just permissible to do. All right. So now I hope you understood that. Just to summarize of what we talked about today is the concept of what is sunnah mu'akkada. So I've talked about sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ, he's brought the deen, but then we specify that which comes beyond the fard, wajib, anything beyond that which was emphasized and it was done widespread by the Sahaba. Because if the Sahaba did it widespread, that shows that it was considered to be something really important to do. But if they're not doing it, then the question comes to mind. We know that the Sahaba would not deliberately disobey the Prophet ﷺ. Why are they doing it like this? Then we would say that it's considered to be an act which they didn't understand it to be something as important. They understood it slightly less. Make sense? I hope that benefits you guys, inshallah. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.